The mahogany conference table in my parents' private office had witnessed 3 generations of Hartley family financial decisions. Today it hosted 17 family members, 3 lawyers, 2 accountants and 1 investment advisor, all gathered for the quarterly wealth management review. My assigned seat was at the far end, near the door, traditionally reserved for family members whose opinions didn't matter. I'd sat in that exact chair for 12 years. "Let's begin," my father announced, distributing leather portfolios embossed with the Hartley family crest. Robert Hartley III, patriarch of a dynasty built on pharmaceutical manufacturing and real estate holdings, commanded attention the way other men commanded armies. "This meeting addresses serious matters. Our family's financial future depends on intelligent decision-making, not sentiment or amateur speculation." His eyes flicked toward me for a fraction of a second. The message was clear. My mother, Patricia Hartley, adjusted her reading glasses with the precision of a surgeon. "We've invited Marcus Wellington from Prestige Capital Management to present their latest portfolio recommendations. Marcus, the floor is yours." Marcus Wellington stood, his Brioni suit and Patek Philippe watch announcing his credentials before he spoke. "Thank you, Patricia. The Hartley family portfolio currently stands at $847 million across diversified holdings. However, we're recommending significant restructuring to capitalize on emerging opportunities." My brother James leaned forward, his Harvard MBA giving him confidence that his actual experience didn't justify. "What kind of restructuring?" "Primarily rotating out of technology positions into traditional value stocks. Tech has had a remarkable run, but we see correction indicators. Blue-chip industrials, pharmaceuticals, that's where smart money is moving." I glanced at the projection screen showing their recommended allocations. The strategy was 5 years outdated, built on assumptions that ignored current market dynamics. I opened my mouth then closed it. Experience had taught me the cost of unsolicited opinions. "Questions?" my father asked, scanning the table. My Uncle Thomas raised his hand. "The biotech sector seems volatile. Are we adequately hedged?" "Excellent question," Marcus replied. "We're recommending a 15% reduction in biotech exposure, shifting those assets into stable pharmaceutical manufacturers with established revenue streams." My cousin David nodded approvingly. "Conservative approach. I like it. Father always said volatility is the enemy of wealth preservation." They spent 40 minutes discussing Marcus's presentation, each family member contributing observations that revealed varying levels of financial literacy. My brother James argued for aggressive expansion into European markets. My Aunt Caroline advocated for increased real estate holdings. My cousin Sarah suggested cryptocurrency allocations, which my father dismissed with a wave of his hand. Nobody asked for my input. "Before we vote on implementing these recommendations," my father said, "I want to address something that's come to my attention." He pulled out his phone, scrolling briefly before looking up. "It seems someone has been making unauthorized trades in the family's brokerage accounts. Small positions, nothing catastrophic, but it represents a troubling pattern of amateur interference." My stomach tightened. Those weren't unauthorized trades. They were hedges I'd implemented through a separate advisory relationship, protecting the family's exposure to exactly the kind of market correction Marcus's outdated strategy would exacerbate. "The trades were made through some sort of proxy advisory service," my mother added, her disapproval evident. "We don't know who authorized it, but the activity suggests someone without proper understanding of our overall strategy tried to play investor." My cousin David snorted. "Probably one of the younger cousins who watches too much financial news. Think they understand markets because they read some Reddit thread." "This is precisely why we have professionals," Marcus interjected smoothly. "Emotional trading, following trends without understanding fundamentals. It's how fortunes are lost." My father's gaze swept the table, landing on each person in turn. "I want to be absolutely clear. From this point forward, no one makes investment decisions without explicit approval from this council. Our wealth is not a playground for amateur speculation. Real investors only at this table." The words hit like a physical blow, though I kept my expression neutral. "Furthermore," he continued, "anyone found circumventing our established protocols will be removed from wealth distribution discussions entirely. This is serious business, not a hobby." My mother nodded firmly. We've worked too hard building this family's security to have it jeopardized by someone playing with money they don't understand. I took a careful breath, weighing my options. 12 years of being dismissed, of having my credentials ignored, of watching inferior strategies implemented because they came from men in expensive suits. I'd earned my chartered financial analyst designation while they were still calling it a cute hobby. I'd built a career managing institutional portfolios while they assumed I was playing with spreadsheets in some back office. The proxy advisory service wasn't amateur interference. It was Sterling Institutional Partners, where I served as Director of Portfolio Management for $250 million in institutional assets. The unauthorized trades were sophisticated hedging strategies that had already saved the Hartley portfolio $23 million in potential losses. But they didn't know that. They'd never asked about my career, never inquired about my qualifications, never considered that the daughter who'd been relegated to the doorside seat might actually understand markets better than their Ivy League credentialed advisor. If there's nothing else, my father began, reaching for his gavel. Actually, I said quietly, I have questions about the portfolio recommendations. The room went silent. My father's expression darkened. Sophie, this isn't the time for the biotech sector reductions, I continued, keeping my voice level. Marcus is recommending rotating into pharmaceutical manufacturers, but he hasn't addressed the patent cliff facing 3 of his suggested holdings. They're losing exclusivity on major revenue drivers within 18 months. How does that support a value-focused strategy? Marcus's smile was patronizing. Those companies have robust pipelines to replace declining revenue streams. It's all in the analyst reports. Which analyst reports? I asked. Because Morningstar downgraded 2 of them last quarter, citing pipeline concerns. And the third just had an FDA rejection on their primary phase 3 candidate. Sophie, my mother's voice carried a warning. This is a professional presentation. Perhaps we should let Marcus finish before. I'm just asking questions, I said. Isn't that what due diligence looks like? My brother James laughed. Due diligence. That's rich. What do you know about due diligence, Sophie? You work in some administrative role at an investment firm. That doesn't make you qualified to question professionals. Administrative role, I repeated softly. Is that what you think I do? We know you work at Sterling Institutional Partners, my father said. Some sort of support position. It's perfectly respectable work, but it doesn't qualify you to critique sophisticated investment strategies designed by people with decades of experience. I could have corrected him then. Should have, perhaps. But 12 years of dismissal had taught me the value of timing. Marcus, my Uncle Thomas said, perhaps you could address Sophie's concerns? If only to educate her on how professional analysis works. Marcus's smile grew sharper. Of course. Sophie, the pharmaceutical companies I've recommended have been vetted through comprehensive analysis. While it's true that patent expiration creates challenges, these firms have proven track records of navigating such transitions. Their management teams are experienced, their balance sheets are strong, and their dividend yields provide downside protection. What about their price-to-earnings ratios compared to sector averages? I asked. You're recommending buying companies trading at premiums during a period where their earnings are likely to contract. That's not value investing, that's catching a falling knife. Sophie, my father's voice had gone cold. Enough. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I met his eyes. Or am I asking the same questions any competent investor would ask before committing $127 million to a single sector rotation? You don't have the experience to evaluate these decisions, my mother said firmly. Marcus has managed billions. You file paperwork for an investment firm. My cousin Sarah giggled nervously. Sophie, maybe you should stick to whatever it is you actually do at work. This is pretty far above your pay grade. I stood slowly, gathering my untouched portfolio materials. You're right. I should stick to what I actually do. Good, my father said. Then we can proceed with the vote. All in favor of implementing Marcus's recommendations. The conference room door opened. My assistant, Jennifer, entered with an apologetic expression. I'm so sorry to interrupt, Mr. Hartley, but there's an urgent call for Ms. Sophie. It's Charles Morrison from Sterling Institutional Partners. He says it's critical. My father's jaw tightened. Tell him she'll call back. We're in the middle of. He specifically said it concerns the Hartley family portfolio, Jennifer continued. He needs to speak with Ms. Sophie immediately. The room went very quiet. My brother James frowned. Why would someone from Sterling need to talk to you about our portfolio? I'd been planning to let this play out naturally, but Charles Morrison had impeccable timing. Put him on speaker, please. Jennifer set her phone on the table, pressing the speaker button. Sophie. Charles's voice filled the room. The managing director of Sterling Institutional Partners, a man whose firm managed $4.7 billion in institutional assets. I apologize for the interruption, but we have a situation with the Hartley portfolio that requires your immediate attention. My father leaned forward. This is Robert Hartley. Who are you and why are you calling about our family's investments? Pause. Mr. Hartley? This is Charles Morrison, Managing Director at Sterling Institutional Partners. I'm calling because your daughter manages our institutional portfolios, and the Hartley family account falls under her purview. We've received some concerning information about proposed strategy changes that could impact the protective positions she's established. The silence that followed could have swallowed sound itself. Manages? My mother said weakly. Sophie manages portfolios? Yes, ma'am, Charles replied, confusion evident in his voice. Sophie has been our director of portfolio management for the past 6 years. She oversees approximately $250 million in institutional assets, including the advisory relationship we maintain with Hartley Family Holdings. Is this not common knowledge? She's one of the most talented portfolio managers in the industry. Marcus Wellington had gone pale. My father's papers slipped from his fingers, scattering across the mahogany table. There must be some mistake, my brother James said. Sophie works in administration. She's not a portfolio manager. I assure you there's no mistake, Charles said, his tone sharpening. Sophie holds her CFA charter, completed her master's in financial engineering from MIT, and has delivered an average annual return of 23% across her managed portfolios over the past 6 years. She's been shortlisted for Portfolio Manager of the Year 3 times. My Aunt Caroline made a sound like air escaping a balloon. The unauthorized trades you mentioned, Mr. Hartley, Charles continued, those were Sophie's protective hedges. She identified significant downside risks in your current allocations and implemented defensive positions that have already saved your portfolio approximately $23 million in potential losses over the past 18 months. She does this while maintaining strict ethical walls and working within appropriate advisory structures. 23 million, my father repeated mechanically. Sir. Sophie's quantitative models predicted the tech correction 6 months before it occurred. Her biotech hedges protected against the FDA approval volatility that caught most investors off guard. Her work has been, quite frankly, exceptional. I watched 17 faces process information that contradicted 12 years of assumptions. My brother's Harvard MBA suddenly seemed less impressive. Marcus Wellington's Brioni suit looked more costume than credential. Sophie, my father said, his voice strange, is this true? Yes, I said simply. But you never told us you were a portfolio manager. You never asked what I actually did, I pointed out. You assumed I was in administration and I stopped correcting you after the first 100 times. It seemed easier to let you believe what you wanted to believe. My mother had gone white. Mitt? You have a master's degree from MIT. Graduated top of my class, I confirmed. The same year James got his Harvard MBA. I sent you both invitations to my graduation. You were traveling in the Maldives. Mr. Hartley, Charles's voice interrupted the growing silence. I'm calling because we've been informed that you're considering implementing strategy recommendations from an external advisor. Sophie's concerned that these recommendations could substantially increase your portfolio's risk profile. As your advisory partner, we need to discuss this before any changes are implemented. My father's eyes locked on Marcus Wellington. What exactly is being recommended? A sector rotation, I said before Marcus could respond. Significant reduction in technology holdings, which have been our strongest performers, in favor of pharmaceutical manufacturers that are about to face major patent headwinds. It's a strategy that would have been reasonable 5 years ago but ignores current market dynamics. That's an oversimplification, Marcus protested. Is it? I pulled out my phone, opening a document. Your recommended pharmaceutical holdings. Bennett Pharmaceuticals loses exclusivity on their diabetes drug in 14 months. That's 67% of their revenue. Kingsford Medical faces patent expiration on their cardiovascular line in 10 months. 53% of revenue. Northbridge Pharma just had their key pipeline candidate rejected by the FDA, and they don't have another phase 3 candidate for at least 3 years. These are all publicly available facts that any competent advisor would have incorporated into their analysis. Marcus's face had gone from pale to red. Those companies have strategies to address these challenges. Hope isn't a strategy, I said. And management promises aren't data. The market is already pricing in their challenges. That's why they look like value stocks. They're cheap for a reason. My Uncle Thomas spoke quietly. Sophie, what would you recommend? First, I'd maintain the technology positions. Yes, there's been a correction, but the fundamental drivers remain strong. Second, I'd increase exposure to healthcare technology, the convergence of medical devices and AI. Third, I'd diversify into emerging markets, specifically Southeast Asia, where demographic trends support long-term growth. And fourth, I'd maintain the protective hedges I've already established through the advisory relationship. That's far more aggressive than what Marcus is suggesting, my Aunt Caroline said. No, y correcta. It's more informed. There's a difference. Marcus is recommending we chase safety by buying expensive stocks in declining sectors. I'm recommending we maintain positions in growing sectors with strong fundamentals while protecting against downside risk through proper hedging. Mr. Hartley, Charles said through the speaker, I should mention that Sophie's strategy recommendations have been peer-reviewed by our entire investment committee. We stand behind her analysis. My father looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. How long have you been managing institutional portfolios? 6 years as Director of Portfolio Management. Before that, 3 years as a senior analyst. I started at Sterling right after graduating from MIT. 9 years, my mother whispered. You've been doing this for 9 years and we thought that I was filing paperwork, I finished. Yes. My brother James had recovered some of his composure. Even if this is true, managing some institutional accounts doesn't qualify you to critique family wealth strategy. The scale is different. The complexity. James, I interrupted gently, the smallest portfolio I manage is $15 million. The largest is $87 million. Your personal trust fund, which you've mentioned is $4.5 million, is well within my standard scope of work. And the Hartley family portfolio, while substantial, is exactly the type of multigenerational wealth structure I specialize in. He opened his mouth, then closed it. My cousin David found his voice. If you're really this successful portfolio manager, why didn't you say something? Why let us think you were nobody? Nobody? I repeated. Is that what you thought I was? The room stayed silent. I tried telling you, I said quietly. 12 years ago when I graduated from MIT, I told you about my degree. You said it was nice that I was keeping busy. When I got my first analyst position, I explained what I did. You suggested I should aim for something more stable like teaching. When I earned my CFA charter, a designation that requires 3 years of intensive study and has a pass rate under 50%, you told me it was good that I had hobbies. Sophie, my father began. When I was promoted to portfolio manager, managing $50 million in assets, I mentioned it at Thanksgiving dinner. Uncle Thomas said it was sweet that I was playing with pretend money. When I was featured in Financial Times discussing emerging market strategies, James told me I should focus on finding a husband instead of chasing career fantasies. When I made the shortlist for Portfolio Manager of the Year, nobody in this family acknowledged it because nobody in this family reads investment industry publications. My mother's hands trembled. We didn't know. You didn't ask, I corrected. There's a difference. You decided what I was, some sort of administrative assistant playing at business, and nothing I said changed that narrative. So eventually I stopped trying. Marcus Wellington cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the portfolio recommendations rather than family dynamics. No, my father said, his voice hard. Perhaps you should explain why you're recommending strategies that ignore the concerns Sophie just raised. Concerns that, apparently, are significant enough that Sterling Institutional Partners felt the need to intervene. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Those patent issues are well known. They're already priced into the stocks. Are they? I pulled up another document on my phone. Because based on your recommended purchase prices, you're assuming the market is undervaluing these companies. But if the patent losses are fully priced in, there's no upside, just downside risk if their pipeline strategies fail. Which analysis is correct, Marcus? He didn't answer. Mr. Hartley, Charles said from the speaker, I should also mention that Sophie's advisory relationship with your family has been conducted with full transparency and proper ethical walls. She doesn't receive direct compensation from your account. That goes through our standard institutional fee structure. Her involvement has been purely analytical, providing the kind of sophisticated risk management that family offices typically pay premium rates for. How much has she saved us? My Uncle Thomas asked. You mentioned $23 million in prevented losses. That's a conservative estimate, Charles replied. Her hedges protected against the tech correction, biotech volatility, and several sector-specific disruptions. Without those protective positions, your portfolio would have experienced approximately $23 million in additional drawdowns during market corrections over the past 18 months. And that doesn't include the opportunity cost of the strategies she recommended that you didn't implement because you weren't aware of her credentials. The silence in the room had changed quality. No longer shock, now calculation. My cousin Sarah spoke hesitantly. Sophie, when you say you manage $250 million in institutional assets, that's real? That's really what you do? Yes, I said. I oversee portfolio strategy for university endowments, family offices, and high-net-worth individuals. I specialize in multigenerational wealth preservation with growth objectives. It's exactly what this family needs, which is why I tried so hard to be involved 12 years ago. But you stopped trying, my father said. I stopped banging my head against a wall, I corrected. But I didn't stop protecting this family's wealth. The advisory relationship through Sterling let me provide analysis and recommendations without having to fight for a seat at this table. I could do the work without needing your approval. My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Sophie, we didn't mean to. Dismiss me? Condescend to me? Treat me like an amateur who didn't understand serious business. Kept my voice even. I know you didn't mean to. That's almost worse. You genuinely believed you were being kind by tolerating my presence at these meetings. What happens now? My brother James asked, his MBA-fueled confidence completely evaporated. I looked at my father. That depends. Mr. Morrison is on the line waiting for direction on the advisory relationship. You can implement Marcus's recommendations and dissolve the Sterling partnership. Or you can actually listen to my analysis, the same analysis that institutional clients pay premium rates for. My father's jaw worked. Robert Hartley III, patriarch and titan of industry, faced with a choice that shouldn't have been a choice at all. Mr. Hartley, Charles said, I should mention that if you choose to end our advisory relationship, we would of course respect that decision. However, I'd encourage you to at least review Sophie's full analysis before implementing any major strategy changes. We can provide you with her complete track record, peer reviews, and performance metrics. Make an informed decision. She's your daughter, my Uncle Thomas said to my father. How did we not know she was managing hundreds of millions of dollars? Because we never asked what she actually did, my father said quietly. We saw what we wanted to see. I gathered my materials, tucking them into my briefcase. I need to return Mr. Morrison's call from a secure line. You have my analysis on the recommended portfolio changes. It's been in your inbox for 3 days, though I'm guessing nobody looked at it since it came from me. Take whatever time you need to decide whether you want professional advice from your daughter or expensive advice from someone whose research is 3 years outdated. I walked toward the door, Jennifer following with her phone. Sophie, wait, my father said. I paused, hand on the doorknob. Your analysis, he said. The one you sent. Can you present it? Now. I turned back to the table. 17 faces watched me, their expressions transformed from dismissal to something approaching respect. Or maybe just fear. Fear that they'd spent 12 years ignoring someone whose expertise could have substantially increased their wealth. I can, I said. But first I need clarity on something. Am I being invited to present because you're suddenly interested in my professional opinion? Or because you're afraid of what happens to the family portfolio if I walk out of this room? The question hung in the air like smoke. My mother spoke first. Both. Is that honest enough? I almost smiled. Yes. That's honest enough. I returned to the table, but this time I didn't take the seat by the door. I moved to the head of the table, opposite my father, setting my briefcase down with deliberate care. Jennifer, I said, please tell Mr. Morrison I'll call him back in 1 hour. And ask him to prepare the full Hartley portfolio analysis for distribution to the family. As Jennifer left, I opened my laptop, connecting it to the projection system. My presentation replaced Marcus Wellington's outdated slides, sophisticated quantitative models, risk-adjusted return projections, detailed sector analysis supported by current data rather than hopeful assumptions. Before I begin, I said, looking around the table, everyone needs to understand something. This isn't a family favor. This isn't your daughter playing at business. This is professional advice from someone whose track record speaks for itself. You can take it or leave it, but you will treat it, and me, with the same respect you'd give any expert you're paying premium rates to consult. My father nodded slowly. Agreed. Good, I said, advancing to the first slide. Then let's discuss why Marcus's recommendations would have cost you approximately $47 million over the next 3 years, and what you should be doing instead. For the next 90 minutes, I walked them through institutional-grade portfolio analysis. I showed them the flaws in Marcus's strategy, the opportunities he'd missed, the risks he'd underestimated. I demonstrated how my protective hedges had already saved them millions. I presented alternative strategies supported by quantitative models and stress-tested against multiple market scenarios. Nobody interrupted. Nobody dismissed. Nobody suggested I should stick to filing paperwork. When I finished, my Uncle Thomas spoke first. Sophie, what would it cost to retain you as our primary investment advisor? You can't, I said. I'm your daughter and niece. There are ethical issues with direct advisory relationships. But Sterling Institutional Partners can continue providing institutional-grade analysis through the proper structures. And I can attend these quarterly meetings as a full participant rather than the family member you tolerate by the door. We should vote, my father said. All in favor of maintaining the Sterling advisory relationship and implementing Sophie's strategic recommendations? 17 hands went up. Even Marcus Wellington raised his hand, though his smile had gone professional and cold. Motion carries, my father said. Then, looking at me directly, I owe you an apology. You owe me 12 years of respect, I corrected. But we can start with an apology. We all do, my mother added softly. Sophie, we've been blind. You've been comfortable, I said. It's easier to dismiss someone than to challenge your assumptions about them. But comfortable has cost this family approximately $70 million in opportunity cost over the past 6 years. That's the difference between the returns you've actually earned and what you could have earned if you'd listened to my analysis. The number hit like a physical blow. My brother James looked sick. 70 million. We lost 70 million because we thought you were a secretary. You lost 70 million because you decided what I was without ever asking what I'd become, I said. But we can fix that going forward. If you're willing to actually listen. My father stood, moving around the table until he stood beside my chair. For a moment he just looked at me, this man who'd spent my entire life believing his daughter was pleasant but unremarkable. Sterling Institutional Partners, he said finally. The advisory fees they've been charging, that's been going to support your work? Yes. Through proper institutional channels with full disclosure and ethical walls. I've never profited directly from this family's wealth beyond my standard salary from Sterling. My compensation comes from my other portfolios. The other $250 million you manage. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, your mother and I are hosting a charity gala next month. Major donors, business leaders, political figures. We'd like you to attend as our guest of honor. We'd like to introduce you properly, not as our daughter the amateur, but as Sophie Hartley, CFA, Director of Portfolio Management at Sterling Institutional Partners. It was an olive branch. An expensive, public, irrevocable olive branch. I'll consider it, I said. Sophie. I'll consider it, I repeated. 12 years of dismissal doesn't get fixed with one gala invitation. But it's a start. I closed my laptop, disconnecting from the projection system. Around the table, 17 people sat in silence. Some embarrassed, some calculating, all of them finally seeing me clearly. One more thing, I said, picking up my briefcase. The seat by the door? I won't be sitting there anymore. Either I get a real seat at this table or I don't attend. Your choice. I walked out before anyone could respond, leaving them with their leather portfolios and their shattered assumptions and the uncomfortable knowledge that the person they'd dismissed for 12 years had been protecting their wealth while they'd been protecting their egos. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from Charles Morrison. That was the most expensive conference call in Sterling's history. Also the most satisfying. Coffee tomorrow to discuss the Hartley implementation strategy. I smiled, typing my response. Make it lunch. We have a lot to discuss and I'm billing them for my time now. As I drove away from my parents' estate, I thought about the years I'd spent trying to earn a seat at that mahogany table. All the credentials I'd earned, all the achievements I'd accumulated, all the expertise I'd developed. None of it had mattered until they'd been forced to see the cost of ignoring me. But now they knew. Now they all knew. And on Monday, when I returned for our first real strategy session, I wouldn't be sitting by the door. I'd be sitting where I'd belonged all along, at the center of decisions that would determine this family's financial future for generations. The amateur they'd dismissed was about to teach them what real investing looked like. And they were going to pay premium rates for the privilege.